This isn't just another small-town love story. When Ella Mae Sullivan's fiancé discovers she can't have children, he doesn't just break off their engagement. He humiliates her in front of their entire church congregation. In Cedar Valley, Texas, where family legacy is everything, being labeled barren is worse than being branded with a scarlet letter. But Ella's about to learn that fate has a way of turning the tables. Bo Callahan isn't your typical wealthy rancher. Since losing his wife and unborn child 5 years ago, he's become a ghost of a man, managing his vast empire from the shadows. When these two broken souls cross paths at his ranch's community school, something changes. The town thinks they know how this story ends after all. What can two people marked by loss possibly offer each other? But they're about to witness how love rewrites the rules of family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The church bulletin lay crumpled on the vestibule floor, its crisp type marred by hasty red ink. Sullivan Matthews' wedding celebration now bore an angry slash through it, like a wound bleeding across the page. It would be the first of many wounds Ella Mae Sullivan would endure that Sunday morning. She stood at the altar in her cream-colored dress, not white, because James had insisted it wouldn't be proper for a schoolteacher to wear pure white. The morning light filtered through stained glass, painting her face in kaleidoscope colors that masked her growing paleness. Pastor Roberts had just asked if anyone knew of any reason why these two shouldn't be joined in holy matrimony. She never expected James would be the one to speak. "I can't do this." His voice cracked like thin ice over deep water. "I'm sorry, Ella Mae, but I can't marry you." The collective intake of breath from the congregation seemed to suck all the air from the church. Ella's fingers tightened around her bouquet of Texas wildflowers, the stems crushing beneath her grip. "James?" The question barely escaped her lips. He turned to face her, but his eyes wouldn't meet hers. "I saw the medical papers in your desk drawer yesterday, when I was helping. You grade those final tests." His voice grew stronger, self-righteous. "You can't have children, Ella. You knew this, and you didn't tell me." The words hit her like physical blows. She'd planned to tell him after the honeymoon, had drafted the speech 100 times in her head, had prayed for the right moment, the right words. "I was going to what? Wait until after we were married? Trap me into a childless marriage?" James stepped back, his polished shoes squeaking against the wooden floor. "My family has had children in Cedar Valley for 5 generations, Ella. 5 generations of Matthews men providing for their wives and children. I can't be the one to end that legacy." Each word hammered another nail into the coffin of her dreams. The church seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as 200 pairs of eyes bored into her. She saw Mrs. Matthews, James's mother, nodding in grim approval, saw her own mother's hand fly to her mouth in horror, saw her 3rd-grade student Jenny Watson's confused face in the second pew. "James, please," she whispered. "We could adopt. There are other ways." "Other ways?" He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "This isn't about other ways, Ella. This is about bloodlines, legacy, family, real family." The bouquet slipped from her numb fingers, wildflowers, scattering across the altar steps like broken dreams. Someone in the back pews began to whisper. The sound spread like wildfire through the congregation, a rising tide of murmurs that would soon become the flood of gossip that would drown her reputation. Pastor Roberts cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should take this discussion—" "No, James." Cut him off. "Everyone needs to know. They need to understand why I'm doing this." He turned to address the congregation directly. "I'm sorry for the spectacle, but better this than living a lie. Better this than letting down my family name." Ella stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. The cream-colored dress suddenly felt like a straitjacket, too tight across her chest. The church spun around her, faces blurring into a kaleidoscope of judgment and pity. Then Sarah Connor, her best friend since 3rd grade, was beside her. An arm around her waist, a whispered, "Let's go, honey." But Ella's feet wouldn't move. "I loved you," she said, her voice carrying in the terrible silence. "I loved you enough to believe that would be enough." James finally met her eyes then, and for a moment she saw something like regret flicker across his face, but his voice was firm when he replied, "Love isn't enough, Ella May. Not without the promise of a real family." Sarah's arm tightened around her waist. This time, Ella's feet moved. One step, then another, down the altar steps she dreamed of descending as a bride, past the scattered wildflowers that seemed to mark her path of shame, past the whispers and stares and the weight of generations of Cedar Valley tradition bearing. Down on her shoulders, the Texas sun blazed bright and merciless as Sarah led her out of the church. Behind them, the heavy wooden doors closed with a sound like judgment, like an ending. But endings have a way of becoming beginnings, though Ella didn't know it yet. Somewhere across town, a man named Bo Callahan was sitting in his empty ranch house, reading the same church bulletin, unaware that fate was about to give them both a second chance at what they'd lost. The sympathy cards arrived like fallen leaves after a storm, piling up on Ella's front porch. She'd stopped collecting them after the third day, letting them gather dust under the Texas sun. Each envelope held someone else's version of comfort, someone else's judgment wrapped in Bible verses and platitudes. Sarah found her sitting cross-legged on her living room floor, surrounded by unopened cards and half-packed boxes. The TV droned quietly in the background, tuned to an old western neither of them was watching. "You're not really thinking of leaving Cedar Valley, are you?" Sarah settled onto the worn floral couch, pushing aside a box labeled classroom supplies. "This is your home." Ella picked up one of the cards, running her finger along its pristine edge. "Mrs. Henderson dropped this one off personally. Told me she's praying for my situation, like it's some kind of disease that prayer might cure. Mrs. Henderson still thinks Elvis is alive and running a gas station in Lubbock." Sarah reached down, squeezing Ella's shoulder. "Since when do you care what she thinks?" "Since the entire town started looking at me like I'm broken." Ella's voice cracked. "You should have seen the email from the school board. All concerns about maintaining appropriate standards and setting proper examples. Their worried parents might not want their children taught by someone who," she swallowed hard, "someone who can't have any of her own. That's ridiculous. You're the best teacher Cedar Valley's got. Tell that to Monica Phillips. She pulled Amy out of my class yesterday." Ella stood, walking to the window. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the street in shades of gold and shadow. Said she didn't want her daughter getting confused about family values. Sarah's sharp intake of breath spoke volumes. "I'll have a word with Monica." "Don't." Ella turned, managing a weak smile. "It'll just make things worse. You know how this town works. By next week they'll be saying I knew all along, that I tried to trap James, deceive him. That's why I didn't wear white. Did you hear that one? Mrs. Matthews is telling everyone it was a sign of my guilt. James Matthews is a coward who cares more about his family name than actual family." Sarah stood, her voice fierce. "And his mama's been bitter since her prize roses lost to mine at the county fair 3 years running." The attempt at humor fell flat. Ella picked up a framed photo from one of the boxes, her class from last year, all gap-toothed smiles and summer dreams. "Maybe they're right. What business does someone like me have teaching children when I can't?" Her voice caught. "Stop it." Sarah crossed the room, taking the photo from Ella's trembling hands. "Being a mother and being a teacher aren't the same thing. You're amazing with those kids because you see them, really see them. That's got nothing to do with whether or not you can have children of your own." A knock at the door made them both jump. Ella wiped hastily at her eyes. If that's another sympathy card. But when Sarah opened the door, there was only Mrs. Rodriguez from next door holding a covered casserole dish. "Brought you some dinner, mijita," she said, pushing past. "Sarah, you're too skinny already, and sorrow's no excuse for not eating." The smell of green chili chicken filled the room as Mrs. Rodriguez set the dish on the coffee table. She looked at the scattered cards and boxes, clicking her tongue. "What's all this? You're not going anywhere." "I'm just considering my options," Ella said carefully. "Options?" Mrs. Rodriguez planted her hands on her ample hips. "Let me tell you about options. When my Eduardo and I couldn't have children, everyone had opinions. His mama wanted him to leave me. The priest suggested we weren't praying hard enough." She smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. "Know what we did? We loved each other anyway, built a life anyway, and now we have more grandchildren than we can count, all adopted, all ours." Ella blinked. "I didn't know." "Course you didn't. It was before your time. But that's my point, mijita. Today's scandal is tomorrow's old news, unless you run away. Then it becomes legend." The older woman's words hung in the air, heavy with wisdom and chili spice. Ella looked at the boxes surrounding her, suddenly seeing them for what they were, not an escape, but a surrender. "I don't know how to face them," she whispered. The whispers, the stares. "One day at a time," Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. "And you eat. Everything looks better with a full stomach." As if on cue, Sarah began clearing space on the coffee table. "She's right. We'll eat, and then we'll make a plan. A real one. That doesn't involve running away." Ella looked between these two women, her best friend and her neighbor, and felt something shift inside her. Not healing, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. The cards could stay unopened, the boxes could wait. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow, she'd find out what kind of strength she really had. What she didn't know was that, across town, another soul was about to offer her a different kind of option altogether. One that would change everything. The old brass school bell sat tarnished, but proud on the weathered desk, its surface etched with decades of history. Ella ran her fingers over the worn metal, tracing the inscription. Callahan Ranch School, Eston, 1923. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the empty classroom. "My grandmother used to ring that. A bell every morning," a deep voice said from the doorway. You could hear it clear across the valley. Ella turned to find a tall man filling the doorframe, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the morning light. Beau Callahan looked nothing like the gossip described him. The town painted him as a tragic recluse, a wealthy ghost haunting his sprawling ranch. But the man before her was solid, present, weathered by life, but not broken by it. "Mr. Callahan." She straightened, smoothing her skirt with suddenly nervous hands. "I wasn't expecting—" "Call me Beau." He stepped into the room, boots quiet against the hardwood floor. "Everyone does, except the bank manager and my mother." A slight smile touched his face, softening the lines around his eyes. "Though she only uses Mr. Callahan when she's particularly disappointed in me." The attempt at humor caught her off guard. She'd prepared herself for pity, for awkward references to her situation. Instead, he moved to the windows, looking out over the ranch grounds as if giving her space to collect herself. "It's a beautiful classroom," she offered, meaning it. The space was all natural light and rich wood, with built-in bookshelves lining one wall and large windows offering views of rolling pastures. "Hasn't been used in 5 years." He turned back to face her. "Not since—" He let the sentence hang, but Ella knew what filled that silence. Not since his wife died. Not since he'd closed the school that had served ranch families for generations. Why now? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Because things can't stay frozen forever. His eyes met hers, direct and clear. The ranch hands' children are getting older. They're driving 40 minutes each way to the county school. It's time to restart something that never should have stopped. And you need a teacher who's desperate enough to take the job, Ella thought, but didn't say. The position had appeared like a miracle 3 days ago, hand-delivered by Sarah, who'd heard about it from her cousin who worked at the feed store. A full-time teaching position, housing included, far from the whispers of Cedar Valley proper. "I know what they're saying about me in town," she said quietly, "and I know what they say about me." He shrugged, a gesture too casual to be entirely genuine. "That I'm a hermit, a ghost." That I let grief turn me into someone my wife wouldn't recognize. He picked up the bell, its weight familiar in his hands. Maybe they're right. But I also know that sometimes the people this town gives up on are the ones who have the most to give. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Outside, a horse nickered, and somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed. The ranch was alive, with morning sounds so different from the sterile silence of her empty classroom in town. There are 12 children, he continued, setting the bell down carefully, ages 6 to 12. Most have grown up on horses before they could walk. They'll need someone who can handle independence, who understands that learning doesn't just happen between four walls. And you think I'm that someone. I think you're someone who knows what it's like to have the ground disappear beneath your feet. Someone who understands that sometimes the path forward isn't the one you planned. He moved toward the door, pausing in the frame. The job's yours if you want it. Housing's in the old foreman's cottage. It's small, but it's got a good view of the sunrise. Maria, our cook, keeps the main house running, and she's already excited about having another woman on the ranch. He smiled slightly. Fair warning. She'll try to feed you 3 times a day. Ella looked around the classroom again, seeing not what it was, but what it could be. Fresh paint, new books, children's artwork on the walls. A place where worth wasn't measured in bloodlines or tradition. When would you need me to start? Monday. He hesitated. Unless that's too soon. Too soon would be never going back to Cedar Valley. Too soon would be hiding in her house with those unopened sympathy cards. She squared her shoulders. Monday? Works perfectly. He nodded, approval flickering in his eyes. Welcome to Callahan Ranch, Miss Sullivan. He turned to leave, then added almost casually, You know, that bell hasn't rung in 5 years. Might be nice to hear it echo across the valley again. After he left, Ella stood in the quiet classroom, her hand resting on the old brass bell. Outside, the ranch stretched toward the horizon, full of possibility, and for the first time since that Sunday in church, she felt something that felt suspiciously like hope. The newspaper clipping was yellowed with age, carefully preserved behind glass in the Cedar Valley Gazette's front office. Local tragedy strikes Callahan Ranch, the headline read, dated 5 years ago. Sarah found Ella staring at it during their Saturday morning coffee run. You don't need to torture yourself with that, Sarah said softly, but Ella couldn't look away from the grainy photo of a younger, smiling Bo Callahan with his arm around a beautiful dark-haired woman, Rebecca Callahan, 32, an unborn child. Lost in tragic accident, Ella read quietly. Beloved teacher at Callahan Ranch School, wife of prominent rancher Bo Callahan, remembered for her dedication to education and community service. Come on, Sarah tugged at her arm. Let's get our coffee, and did you know she was pregnant when it happened? Ella's finger traced the glass. Did you know she was also a teacher? Honey, this isn't helping anything. But it was. Somehow, it was. Because now she understood the weight in Bo's eyes when he looked at the empty classroom, understood why he'd chosen her of all people to bring life back to that space. Well, if it isn't our wayward schoolteacher, a familiar voice drawled. James's mother, Margaret Matthews, stood in the doorway of the Gazette office, her church. Clothes pristine despite the dusty morning. Though I suppose you're not really ours anymore, are you? Ella straightened her spine. Good morning, Mrs. Matthews. Is it? Margaret's smile was sharp as a rose thorn. I heard the most interesting news at Bridge Club yesterday. Seems you found yourself a position out at Callahan Ranch. She adjusted her pearl necklace. Rather quick work, wouldn't you say? The position was available. I was qualified. Ella felt Sarah tense beside her. Oh, I'm sure you were. Margaret's voice dripped honey-coated venom. Though some might wonder about the propriety of it all. A single woman living out there, all alone with that poor widower. She shook her head. But then, propriety was never your strong suit, was it? That's enough. Sarah stepped forward, but Ella caught her arm. You're right, Mrs. Matthews, Ella said calmly. Propriety isn't my strong suit. My strong suit is teaching children. which is exactly what I'll be doing at Callahan Ranch." She moved past the older woman, head high, but Margaret's words followed her onto the sidewalk. "Just remember, dear, damaged people tend to find each other. Doesn't mean they can fix each other." The Texas sun beat down as they walked to Sarah's truck, the morning already thick with heat and unspoken words. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "You know she's just bitter because her son left me at the altar. Because I'm not crawling away in shame." Ella's laugh held no humor. "Or because I'm going to work for the one family in Cedar Valley that's even older and wealthier than the Matthews?" "All of the above." Sarah started the engine, "but mostly because you're standing tall while doing it." They drove in silence for a while, past the familiar storefronts and church steeples of their hometown. Every corner held a memory. The ice cream parlor where they'd celebrated after high school graduation, the park where James had proposed, the school where Ella had taught until a week ago. "Maybe Mrs. Matthews is right," Ella said finally. "Maybe I'm running away to a job that needs doing, to a place where you can use your gifts." Sarah snorted. "Honey, that's not running away, that's running toward something." "But what if," Ella hesitated, "what if I'm just replacing her, Rebecca? What if that's all this is?" Sarah pulled the truck over, turning to face her friend. "Listen, to me, that man didn't hire you because you remind him of his wife. He hired you because you remind him of what that school used to be, what it could be again." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I saw his face when you rang that old school bell yesterday morning. My cousin Tommy works the south pasture. Said it was the first time in 5 years anyone's heard that sound across the valley. Said Bo Callahan stood on his front porch and actually smiled." Ella remembered that moment. The weight of the bell in her hand, the clear tone ringing out across the ranchlands. She hadn't known Bo was listening. "It won't be easy," Sarah continued. "This town has a long memory and a sharp tongue, but you've got something they don't expect." "What's that?" "A chance to write your own story, one that doesn't end with you being the woman James Matthews left at the altar." Sarah squeezed her hand. "Though fair warning, if you start falling for that brooding rancher, I'm going to say, 'I told you so' at your wedding." "Sarah!" "Just saying." Her friend grinned. "Sometimes the best way to prove them wrong is to find happiness where they least expect it." As they drove on, Ella thought about the newspaper clipping, about Rebecca's smiling face and all the dreams that had died with her. But she also thought about that school bell's ring echoing across the valley, about new beginnings and second chances. Sometimes she was learning the things that broke you could also set you free. The crayon drawing appeared on Ella's desk just before lunch. A stick figure in a blue dress, standing in front of a yellow schoolhouse, complete with a crooked bell tower. "Miss Ella" was written in careful first-grade letters beneath it, signed by 6-year-old Lucy Rodriguez, the ranch foreman's daughter. "It's you," Lucy announced proudly from the doorway, her dark braids swinging. "Papa says you made the bells sing again." Ella touched the drawing gently, remembering that morning's nerves as she'd faced her new class for the first time. 12 faces, some curious, some wary, all belonging to children who'd grown up with the rhythm of ranch life in their bones. "The bell's been quiet a long time," an older boy, Tommy Henderson, aged 12, had said during morning introductions. "Mama says it used to ring every day when Miss Rebecca was here." A heavy silence had followed his words. The children shifted in their seats, exchanging glances that held too much understanding for their years. They all knew about Miss Rebecca, about the accident, about why the school had stood empty for so long. But before the silence could stretch too thin, Maria had appeared in the doorway like a guardian angel, her round face beaming. "Who's ready for morning snack? I made my special cinnamon rolls." Now, as lunch approached, those same cinnamon rolls were just a memory of sticky fingers and grateful smiles. The morning had flown by in a blur of placement tests and getting-to-know-you activities. The children, Ella discovered, were bright and eager, if a bit behind in formal academics. but they possessed a practical intelligence that came from growing. Up on the land, they could calculate feed ratios in their heads and understood the complex ecosystem of the ranch better than any textbook could teach. "Miss Ella," Lucy tugged at her skirt. "Can we have class outside sometimes?" Miss Rebecca used to let us learn under the big oak tree. Before Ella could answer, a deep voice came from the doorway. "That oak tree's seen 5 generations of Callahan Ranch students." Bo stood there, his presence filling the room like it had that first day. "My grandmother used to say the best learning happens where you can feel the wind on your face." Lucy beamed at him. "Mr. Bo, did you come to see our new classroom? Miss Ella let us put up our art on the walls, see?" She pointed to the growing collection of drawings pinned to the bulletin board. "I see that." His eyes met Ella's over Lucy's. "The place hasn't felt this alive in a long time." Heat crept up Ella's neck. "The children make it easy. They're natural learners, ranch kids," he said with quiet pride. "They understand that everything's connected, the land, the animals, the people." He paused. "Speaking of connections, Maria wanted me to remind you about lunch. She's made enough. Food to feed half the county, and she'll take it personally if you don't join us." "Oh, I wouldn't want to impose." "It's not an imposition." His voice was firm. "It's tradition. All the ranch hands eat together at the main house. Always have." Another pause. "Rebecca started it, actually. Said a shared meal was as important as any lesson in building community." The mention of his wife's name hung in the air, but without the weight of tragedy it usually carried. Instead, it felt like a bridge between past and present, an acknowledgement rather than a barrier. Lucy tugged at Ella's skirt again. "Maria made her special enchiladas. They're the best thing ever after cinnamon rolls." Ella looked at her tiny student's eager face, then at Bo's quietly expectant one. In town, she'd taken to eating lunch alone in her classroom, avoiding the staff room whispers. But this wasn't town, and these weren't the same judging eyes. "Well," she smiled, "I guess we shouldn't keep Maria waiting." As they walked to the main house, Lucy skipping ahead, Bo fell into step beside her. "The children seem happy," he said. "It's been too quiet around here for too long. They're remarkable kids." Ella clutched Lucy's drawing to her chest. "They make me feel like..." She hesitated. "Like what?" "Like maybe broken things can be made whole again, just in a different way." He was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Maybe that's the best kind of healing, not going back to what was, but forward to what could be." Their eyes met briefly, an understanding passing between them that needed no words. Ahead, Lucy's voice rang out with childish excitement. "Hurry up! Maria says the tortillas are best when they're hot." And so they hurried. Two people learning that sometimes the best new beginnings come disguised as endings, and that healing often happens one small moment at a time, like a child's drawing, a ringing bell, or the simple act of sharing a meal. Together. The recipe card was worn at the edges, stained with butter marks and time. Maria's handwriting flowed across it in faded blue ink. "Abuela's jalapeno cornbread, for family only." Ella stared at it across her kitchen counter, touched by the simple gesture of inclusion it represented. "The secret," Maria had whispered earlier that evening, pressing the card into Ella's hands, "is to heat the cast-iron skillet until it's screaming hot before you pour in the batter. Makes the edges crispy, just like my grandmother taught me." Now, 2 weeks into her life at Callahan Ranch, Ella was beginning to understand that family here meant something different than it did in town. It wasn't about bloodlines or tradition. It was about shared meals and small kindnesses, about belonging simply because you chose to belong. The evening air drifted through her cottage windows, carrying the scent of sage and cattle and late summer. From her small porch, she could see the lights of the main house glowing warm against the darkening sky. Bo's office light was still on, a solitary beacon in the upper window. She'd caught him watching her class earlier that day, standing in the shadow of the old oak tree, as she taught the children about weather patterns, using the ranch itself as their laboratory. The younger ones had delighted in building small wind vanes from paper and sticks, while the older students plotted weather data in their notebooks. "You're good with them," he'd said later, when she'd found him fixing a loose board on the schoolhouse. "Steps. They trust you. They make it easy," she'd replied, but they both knew it was more than that. These children carried their own kinds of hurt, the absence of a beloved teacher, the shadow of tragedy that had touched their small community. They recognized in Ella someone who understood loss, who knew how to keep going anyway. A knock at her door pulled her from the memory. She opened it to find Lucy standing there, clutching a cloth-covered basket. "Mama sent more cornbread," the little girl announced. "She says you're too skinny." Behind her, Miguel Rodriguez, the ranch foreman, smiled apologetically. "Maria's on a mission to fatten up the whole ranch." But Lucy insisted on delivering this, on herself. "Did you know," Lucy said seriously as Ella invited them in, "that Miss Rebecca used to let us have picnic lessons under the oak tree every Friday?" She looked up hopefully. "Even when it was cold, we'd bring blankets and hot chocolate." Miguel started to shush her, but Ella knelt down to Lucy's level. "That sounds like a wonderful tradition. Maybe we could start it up again." Lucy's face lit up. "Really? And can we invite Mr. Bow? He never comes outside much anymore, but Mama says he needs more sun on his face." "Lucy," Miguel warned gently, but there was something like approval in his eyes when he looked at Ella. "We'll see," Ella said diplomatically, though her heart twisted. At the child's innocent observation, she'd noticed how Beau seemed to orbit the edges of ranch life, present but never quite participating. Like her, he was learning how to exist in a world that had shifted beneath his feet. After they left, Ella found herself back on her porch, watching the night deepen over the ranch lands. A horse nickered in the distance, and somewhere an owl called out its lonely song. The recipe card sat in her hand, its edges soft with use. On impulse, she went to her kitchen and began gathering ingredients. The cast-iron skillet, a housewarming gift from Maria, sat ready on her stove. As she mixed cornmeal and buttermilk, she thought about Rebecca's picnic lessons, about Lucy's hopeful face, about Beau's solitary light in the window above. Sometimes, healing happened in giant leaps, moments of courage or dramatic change. But more often she was learning it came in small steps, in recipe cards passed down through generations, in children's traditions honored and renewed, in the simple act of baking cornbread in a kitchen that was slowly beginning to feel like home. Tomorrow, she decided she'd pack up whatever turned out of this first attempt at Maria's recipe. She'd ring the old school bell, gather her students under the oak tree, and maybe, just maybe, that solitary light in the upper window would decide to join them. After all, wasn't that what family did? They fed each other, supported each other, gave each other reasons to step out of the shadows and into the light. The skillet was heating now, almost ready. Ella touched the recipe card one more time, tracing the words, "For family only," and smiled. Sometimes belonging was as simple as a shared recipe, a familiar tradition, and the courage to begin again. The weather-beaten ranch sign creaked ominously in the rising wind, its wooden posts straining against the approaching storm. Callahan. Ranch, Esther, 1875. Barely visible beneath years of sun and rain. Ella watched it swing from the schoolhouse window, the afternoon sky turning an unsettling shade of green. "Tornado weather," Miguel announced from the doorway, his usual easy manner replaced by worried focus. "We're moving the horses to the storm shelter barn. Beau wants everyone in the main house until it passes." The children were already gone, sent home early when the weather service issued its first warning. Now, gathering her teaching materials with shaking hands, Ella could feel the air pressure dropping. Growing up in Cedar Valley meant knowing in your bones when a storm meant business. "Miss Ella," Beau's voice carried over a distant rumble of thunder. He stood in the schoolhouse entrance, his figure silhouetted by a flash of lightning. "Leave. We need to move now." But she couldn't leave it all. Not the children's projects, not their carefully crafted stories about ranch life, not Lucy's latest drawing showing their Friday picnic under the oak tree. As she reached for the artwork, a massive thunderclap shook the building. Strong hands caught her shoulders as she startled. "The school will stand," Bo said quietly, his touch steady. "It's weathered worse than this, but we need to get to the house." The wind hit them the moment they stepped outside, carrying stinging bits of dust and debris. Bo's hand moved to the small of her back, guiding her across the yard. The main house stood like a fortress against the darkening sky, its limestone walls solid and reassuring. They nearly made it before the first real blast of the storm struck. The wind turned, violent, almost lifting Ella off her feet. Without hesitation, Bo pulled her against him, shielding her with his body as they stumbled the last few yards to the porch. Maria waited at the door, her face tight with worry. "Gracias a Dios. Come in. Come in. The ranch hands are all in." The cellar. Miguel just radioed. "The horses are secured." The house's interior was a flurry of activity. Children huddled with their parents in the large family room, some clutching toys or blankets. The old ranch hands sat playing cards at the kitchen table, their casual manner belied by frequent glances at the windows. Through it all, the storm raged, its fury rattling the glass in its panes. "We should check the windows upstairs," Bo said, already moving toward the staircase. "The west bedroom shutters were loose yesterday." "I'll help," Ella offered, following him up. She told herself it was just concern for the house, not the way his presence made her feel anchored against the chaos outside. The upper floor was darker, the electricity flickering uncertainly. They moved from room to room, securing shutters and checking seals. In what was clearly Bo's office, a gust of wind caught a loose window, slamming it open. Papers scattered like startled birds. They lunged for the window together, shoulders brushing as they fought against the wind. For a moment, they were pressed close, hands overlapping on the window frame. Ella could feel the warmth of him even. Through the storm's chill, could smell the leather and sage scent that seemed to follow him everywhere. "I got it," he said roughly, but neither of them moved immediately. In the strange stormlight, his face was all shadows and angles, his eyes intense as they met hers. A crash of thunder broke the moment. They secured the window in silence, then began gathering the scattered papers. Ella caught glimpses of ranch accounts, veterinary records, and her heart stuttered. A photograph of a dark-haired woman sitting under the old oak tree, surrounded by laughing children. Bo took the photo gently from her hands. "Rebecca loved storms," he said quietly. "Used to sit on the porch and watch them roll in across the valley, said they reminded her that nature doesn't care about our plans or expectations. It just is what it is." "She sounds wise," Ella ventured. She was. He set the photo carefully on his desk, but she also believed in rebuilding after the storm passed, in finding beauty in what remained. His eyes found hers again, in starting over. The lights chose that moment to fail completely, plunging them into storm shadow. Somewhere downstairs a child squealed, and Maria's voice rose in comfortable reassurance. The house creaked around them, solid and secure, despite the tempest. "We should get back," Ella whispered, though neither of them moved. "We should," Bo agreed, but his hand found hers in the darkness, warm and calloused and real. They stood there for a moment, two people who'd weathered their own storms, finding unexpected shelter in each other's presence. When they finally descended to join the others, something had shifted between them, subtle as a change in air pressure. Before rain, the storm raged on outside, but within the walls of the old ranch house, something new was taking root. Fragile as hope, strong as a storm-tested foundation, and growing stronger with each passing moment. The leather-bound photo album lay between them on the porch swing, its pages worn soft with handling. The storm had passed, leaving behind that peculiar clarity that follows nature's fury. Air scrubbed clean, stars piercing bright, and truth rising easier to the surface. "I found it while checking for storm damage in the attic," Bo explained, his voice low in the evening quiet. "Haven't looked at it since." He trailed off, fingers hovering over the cover. Ella sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of him, far enough to give him space with his memories. The porch lights cast soft shadows, and somewhere in the distance, nightbirds called to each other across the freshly washed darkness. He opened the album. The first photo showed a younger Rebecca, dark hair streaming in the wind, sitting astride a paint horse. Her smile was infectious, her joy palpable even through the years. "That's the day I met her," Bo said. "She'd come to interview for the teaching position, showed up on her own horse, said any ranch schoolteacher ought to know how to ride." A smile touched his lips. "Should have known right then she'd change everything." Ella watched his face as he turned the pages. Photos of Rebecca with her students, at ranch gatherings on their wedding day. "She was beautiful," Ella said softly. "She was alive." Bo's voice caught. Everything about her was so damn alive. Even at the end, when the doctors told us the pregnancy was risky, He swallowed hard. "She said some things were worth any risk." The weight of unsaid things hung between them. Finally, Ella gathered her courage. "My condition, it's called premature ovarian failure. The doctors discovered it during routine tests. Before the wedding, I'd always dreamed of having children, but..." She wrapped her arms around herself. "James didn't even let me explain about other options. Adoption, surrogacy, he just walked away." Bo finished, his voice hard, "because he cared more about bloodlines than love. His family's been in Cedar Valley for generations. The Matthews, name, the Matthews legacy." She tried to keep the bitterness from her voice. "I thought love would be enough. Stupid, really. No." Bo's hand found hers in the darkness, warm and sure. "Not stupid, brave. Believing in love is always brave." She looked down at their joined hands, then back at the album. A new photo caught her eye. Rebecca surrounded by children, but not in the schoolhouse. "Is that the Cedar Valley Children's Home?" She volunteered there every weekend. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "She couldn't carry a baby to term. We'd lost 2 before." He took a shaky breath. "But she said family wasn't about what your body could or couldn't do. It was about who you chose to love." The revelation settled over Ella like a warm blanket. "You never told anyone in town. Wasn't their business. But when I heard what happened at your wedding..." He turned to face her fully. "I knew you'd understand these kids like she did, not as replacements for what you couldn't have, but as gifts in their own right." Tears pricked at Ella's eyes. "The town thinks you hired me out of pity. The town thinks a lot of things, most of them wrong." His free hand came up to brush a tear from her cheek. "I hired you because when you rang that school bell that first day, I saw the same light in your eyes that I used to see in hers. The same understanding that teaching isn't just about lessons in books. It's about showing children they matter exactly as they are." A sob caught in Ella's throat. "I'm not trying to replace her. I need you to know that. You couldn't if you tried." His voice was gentle. "Just like I'm not trying to be your second chance at a happily ever after. We're both too marked by life for fairy tales." "Then what is this?" She gestured between them, at their still joined hands, at the album that held one life's memories while another was tentatively beginning. "This is 2 people who've learned the hard way that love isn't about perfect conditions or meeting town expectations." His fingers tightened on hers. "It's about finding someone who understands your scars, because they have their own." The night wrapped around them, full of cricket song and starlight. The album lay open between them. Rebecca's captured. Smile, blessing this moment of understanding between 2 wounded souls, learning to trust again. "I'm scared," Ella whispered. "Me too." He brought their joined hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared just means we still know how much there is to lose and how much there is to gain." They sat there until the moon rose high, the photo album witnessing this careful fusion of past and present, of endings and beginnings, of 2 hearts learning that sometimes the deepest wounds can become doorways to the most unexpected healing. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under the schoolhouse door sometime before dawn. no signature, no return address. Just crisp white paper filled with small-town poison, penned in precise handwriting. Some women just don't know their place. The ranch may be beyond town limits, but God's judgment knows no boundaries. Leave Bo Callahan to his grief and stop trying to replace what can't be replaced. Ella's hands shook as she read it, the paper crinkling under her tightening grip. Through the schoolhouse windows, she could see Lucy and the other children playing in the early morning light, their laughter a stark contrast to the bitterness in her hands. "Miss Ella?" Maria's voice came from the doorway. "I brought fresh—" She stopped, seeing Ella's face. "What's wrong, mijita?" Ella tried to hide the letter, but Maria was faster, plucking it from her trembling fingers. As she read, her round face darkened like storm clouds gathering. "Cowards," she spat, crumpling the paper. "They don't sign their names because they know their words are garbage." "It's Mrs. Matthews," Ella said quietly. "I recognize her handwriting from all those PTA meetings." Maria muttered something in Spanish that was definitely not suitable for school hours. "That woman! She thinks because her family's been here since dirt, she can what?" Bo's voice cut through the tension. He stood in the doorway, his frame filling it like a shield against the outside world. One look at their faces, and he was crossing the room in long strides. "What happened?" Maria thrust the crumpled letter at him. As he read, his jaw tightened, and Ella saw a glimpse of the man the ranch hands called boss in their most serious moments. "I knew people were talking," Ella said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "At church on Sunday, the way they looked at us during the service. And yesterday at the grocery store, Mrs. Henderson made a point of telling me how dedicated Rebecca was to the ranch, how she'd never tried to change things. Because heaven forbid we let the school bell ring again, or have picnic lessons under the oak tree." Bo's voice was quiet, but carried an edge of steel. "They'd rather this place stay a mausoleum to what was lost? They think I'm trying to replace her." Ella's voice caught, that I'm somehow dishonoring her memory. "No, mijita." Maria took her hands. "They're scared because you're showing them there's more than one way to heal, more than one way to be a family." Maria's right. Bo moved closer, his presence solid and sure. "Rebecca, she'd be the first one to celebrate the school coming back to life, to celebrate you." The morning bell would ring soon, calling the children to class. Through the window, Ella could see them lining up, Lucy at the front with a handful of wildflowers. She'd probably picked on her way in. "I won't let them drive me away," she said, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. "Not from the school, not from—" She glanced at Bo, color rising in her cheeks. "Not from me?" He smiled slightly, but his eyes were serious. "Good. Because I'm not letting you go anywhere." Maria made a satisfied sound. "Good. Now that's settled. I'll deal with Margaret Matthews myself. Nobody messes with my family." "Maria," Bo warned, but there was affection in his tone. "Don't worry, boss. I'll be subtle. Maybe I'll just happen to mention at the church bake sale how Rebecca told me once that her greatest hope was for the ranch school to live on, for someone to love it like she did." Maria's eyes twinkled. "And if I happen to mention this while standing next to Judy Henderson, who can't keep a secret to save her life?" Despite everything, Ella felt a laugh bubble up. This was what the letter writer didn't understand. Here on the ranch, family wasn't about replacing anyone. It was about making room for more love, more connections, more life. Bo's hand found the small of her back, warm and steadying. "You okay?" She looked up at him, at the concern in his eyes, at the way he'd positioned himself between her and the door, like he could shield her from the whole town's judgment. "Yeah," she said softly, "I'm okay." The school bell would ring soon. The children would file in with their books and their dreams and their simple acceptance of love in all its forms. And if the town couldn't understand that healing didn't mean forgetting, that love could grow in the spaces grief left behind, well, that was their loss. Because here, in this schoolhouse, under the wide Texas sky, something beautiful was growing. Something strong enough to weather any storm, signed letter or not. The blue ribbon trembled in Lucy's small hands as she stood on the makeshift stage, her science project about ranch ecosystem conservation drawing appreciative murmurs from the crowd gathered for the annual Callahan Ranch Fair. And my teacher, Miss Ella, helped me understand that everything on the ranch is connected, she announced proudly, just like we're all connected. Ella felt Beau's hand brush against hers as they stood at the edge of the crowd. The touch was brief but deliberate, like so many of their moments these past weeks, a quiet revolution of small gestures and shared glances that hadn't gone unnoticed by the townspeople who'd driven out for the fair. The ranch was transformed for the occasion. Strings of lights crisscrossed the gathering space between the main house and the schoolhouse. Booths displayed student projects alongside ranch crafts and Maria's legendary baking. The air smelled of barbecue and possibility, of autumn leaves. And change. She's got Rebecca's gift for public speaking, a voice cut through Ella's contentment. James Matthews stood a few feet away, his mother hovering at his shoulder like a well-dressed shadow. Though I suppose you've heard all about Rebecca's gifts by now. Ella felt Beau tense beside her, but she touched his arm gently. Yes, James, I have. She was a remarkable teacher who believed every child deserved to shine. She smiled at Lucy, who was now explaining her project to the county superintendent. Some legacies are meant to be honored by continuing them, not freezing them in time. Margaret. Matthew's lips thinned. How convenient for you. Though one might question the propriety of... One might question a lot of things, Margaret. Maria appeared like an avenging angel, bearing a tray of her blue ribbon cornbread. Like why some folks can't recognize a blessing when they see it. Rebecca told me herself, remember, how she prayed the school would find someone with the heart to bring it back to life when she was gone. Margaret's face flushed. I don't recall... No. Must have been when we were planning that last Christmas pageant. You remember, the one where Rebecca said family was about love, not bloodlines. Maria's innocent expression could have won its own blue ribbon. Here, have some cornbread. It's Rebecca's recipe, though Ella's added her own special touch. Sometimes new ingredients make things even better. As the Matthews retreated, properly outmaneuvered, Beau's hand found Ella's again. This time he didn't let go. That woman, Maria muttered, needs more than cornbread to sweeten her disposition. She patted Ella's cheek. You okay, Mijita? I'm fine. And surprisingly, she was. The Matthews words didn't carry the sting they once had. Lucy's project really is remarkable. Thanks to her teacher, Beau said quietly. The pride in his voice made her breath catch. The evening deepened around them, stars appearing above the string lights. Children darted between hay bales and craft. Booths, their laughter mixing with guitar music from the ranch hand's impromptu band. Parents gathered in clusters, comparing projects and sharing stories. It felt like healing looked messy and beautiful and real. Dance with me, Beau said suddenly, as the band struck up a slow country waltz. Ella's heart stuttered. Beau. Everyone's. Watching? Let them. His eyes held hers, serious and sure. I'm tired of pretending I don't want to stand beside you every chance I get. He led her to the dance floor. Really just a patch of grass cleared between the booths. Other couples moved, aside, whispers following in their wake. But when Beau's arms slipped around her waist, when he drew her close under the Texas stars, the whispers faded to nothing. You know what this means, she murmured against his shoulder. There's no going back after this. Good. His voice rumbled through her. I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. With you. They swayed together, his work-roughened hand warm against hers, her skirt brushing against his jeans. She could feel Margaret Matthews' disapproving stare, could hear the mounting murmurs from the townfolks. But she could also hear Lucy's delighted giggle, see Maria's beaming approval, feel the ranch hand's subtle nods of respect. Look, Beau whispered, turning her gently. By the project tables, James Matthews stood studying Lucy's ecosystem display, something like recognition or regret, crossing his face as he read about family systems and interconnected growth. Sometimes, Ella said softly, people can surprise you. You surprised me. Bo's hand tightened on hers, showed me that loving again wasn't a betrayal, that it was possible to honor the past while building something new. The music swelled around them, carrying hints of both memory and promise. And there, under autumn stars and string lights, surrounded by witnesses both approving and not, Bo Callahan bent his head and kissed her. It wasn't their first kiss. That had happened quietly, privately, on her porch after a long day of teaching. But this was different. This was a declaration, a choice made public, a new chapter beginning. When they parted, Lucy's voice rang out clear and happy. "Miss Ella, you got your own blue ribbon now." And somehow, that child's pure joy became the perfect benediction for this moment, caught between what was and what could be. A moment as bright and full of promise as any blue ribbon ever awarded. The old quilt, spread beneath the Texas stars, held generations of Callahan family history in its stitches. Ella ran her fingers over the worn patterns as she and Bo lay side by side in the bed of his pickup, parked on the ridge overlooking the ranch. Below them, lights twinkled in scattered windows, the main house, her cottage, the ranch hands' homes, like earthbound stars marking their own constellation of belonging. "My grandmother made this quilt," Bo said, his voice soft in the darkness. "Called it her stargazing blanket. Said some conversations were best had under an open sky. The autumn air carried the scent of sage and late-blooming wildflowers. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, a lonely sound that only emphasized their closeness. "Rebecca and I used to come up here," he continued, his hand finding Ella's. "In the darkness, after we lost the first baby, then the second. She'd name constellations and talk about all the children we'd never meet, how they were up there somewhere, dancing among the stars." Ella's throat tightened. "Bo, we don't have to. No, I want to." He turned on his side to face her, his features silvered by starlight, "because she also told me something else. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I wouldn't let grief become my only companion. That love was too precious to bury with the dead." A shooting star streaked across the sky, a brief, brilliant arc of light against the darkness. "When I first learned I couldn't have children," Ella whispered, "I used to dream about them. 3 little girls with their daddy's eyes, a boy with a cowlick that wouldn't behave. They felt so real." She swallowed hard. "James said I was being melodramatic, that I couldn't mourn something I never had. He was wrong." Bo's voice carried the weight of experience. "You can mourn the future you thought you'd have. The children you'll never hold. Doesn't make the grief any less real." She turned to face him, their faces close on the old quilt. "How do you do it? Love again, knowing everything can change in a moment?" "Same way you do. One day at a time." His free hand came up to trace her cheek. "When you rang that school bell that first morning, it was like hearing music after years of silence. Wasn't just the sound. It was what it meant. Life, hope, possibility. I was terrified," she admitted. "Thought the whole town would see me as trying to take her place." "You didn't take her place. You created your own." His thumb brushed her lower lip. "Just like you're not taking her place in my heart. You're showing me my heart's bigger than I thought, that it's possible to honor one love while falling into another." The word falling hung between them, weighted with meaning. Above, the stars wheeled in their ancient paths, witnesses to this moment of truth between 2 people learning to trust again. "I'm falling too," Ella whispered, "and it scares me how much I want this, want you, want—" She hesitated. "A family." His voice was gentle. Yes, the admission felt like setting down a heavy burden, not to replace what either of us lost, but something new, something ours. "Lucy asked me yesterday if she could put both our pictures on her family tree project." His smile was visible even in the darkness. Said she figured since we loved each other, we were kind of like her school parents anyway. Tears pricked at Ella's eyes. "That girl has the wisdom of angels." Bo's hand curved around her neck, drawing her closer. "And she's right. Family isn't just about blood or birth. It's about choice. about loving what's right in front of you with your whole heart. When he kissed her this time, it was different from their dance floor declaration. That had been a public statement of intent. This was private, profound, a promise made under stars that had witnessed both their losses and their healing. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "Not despite our scars, but including them, all of you, everything that makes you who you are. I love you too." The words came easily, naturally, like they'd been waiting to be said all along. Scars and all. They lay there until the moon rose high, wrapped in his grandmother's quilt and each other's arms, talking about everything and nothing. About Lucy's project and Maria's matchmaking, and the way the town was slowly, grudgingly beginning to accept them. About dreams of children, adopted, fostered, borrowed, loved, and the family they could build together. And above them, the stars, that had witnessed so much loss, now sparkled with new possibility, as if Rebecca herself was smiling down on this patchwork love story pieced together from grief and hope and second chances. The Callahan family Bible was a massive leather-bound volume that sat on a carved oak stand in Beau's parents' living room. Its pages held 5 generations of births, marriages and deaths, each entry penned in different hands across the decades. Eleanor Callahan, Beau's mother, ran her fingers over the empty spaces beneath her son's name, as Ella sat nervously on the antique sofa. "You know," Eleanor said carefully, "Rebecca used to stare at these blank pages like they were accusing her of something." She looked up, her eyes, so like Beau's, sharp with understanding. "I told her then what I'm going to tell you now. Legacy isn't just about filling spaces in a book." Ella's hands twisted in her lap. "Mrs. Callahan, Eleanor dear, and let me finish." She closed the Bible gently. "My son smiles again. The school bell rings. Children's laughter echoes across the ranch. That's a legacy too. Frank Callahan, silent until now in his leather armchair, cleared his throat. Heard little Lucy Rodriguez did some fancy presentation about ranch ecosystems, won a blue ribbon at the fair. She did," Ella said, warmth flooding her voice. "She compared the ranch to a family system, how every part depends on the others, how removing one element affects the whole." "Smart girl." Frank's weathered face creased in a smile. "Her grandmother used to cook for this house when I was a boy. Now her daddy runs our ranch operations. That's legacy too, isn't it? The kind that doesn't need blood to bind it." Eleanor reached for the Bible again, but this time she opened it to the front, where a passage was highlighted. "Love never fails." "Beau told us about the town's reaction," she said softly. "About Margaret Matthews and her poison pen letters. About James." She shook her head. "Such small minds, thinking legacy is only about names in a book or blood in veins." "I can't give him children," Ella whispered, the words still painful despite their truth. "No," Eleanor agreed, "but you've already given him something just as precious. Hope, joy, a reason to look forward instead of back." She paused. "And there are other ways to build a family, as I suspect you both know." Ella's head snapped up. "He told you about the adoption agency meeting next week. He didn't have to. I saw the papers in his office when I was dropping off mending." Eleanor's eyes twinkled. "I may be old, but I'm not blind. Nor am I as traditional as some might think. But the Callahan name will go on just fine," Frank interrupted. "Through love and choice instead of just birth. Seems fitting, really. This ranch was built on choosing family. Every hand who works here, every child who learns in that schoolhouse, they're all part of the Callahan legacy." The sound of boots on the porch interrupted them. Beau appeared in the doorway, his face questioning as he took in the scene. "Everything okay here?" "Just fine," Eleanor said, standing. "Your father and I were just telling Ella about how legacy works in this family." She walked to a cabinet and pulled out a small, wrapped package. And giving her this, the package was heavy in Ella's hands. She unwrapped it carefully to find a smaller, leather-bound book. Opening it, she found blank pages, but with a familiar format. It's a companion to the family Bible, Eleanor explained, for recording the other kinds of legacies, the children who might come to you through different paths, the lives touched, the love shared. She squeezed Ella's hands. Rebecca started it, actually. There's an entry about every child she taught. We thought you might like to continue it. Tears blurred Ella's vision as she read Rebecca's flowing script. Legacy is not in the blood, but in the love we choose to give. Every child who passes through this ranch carries a piece of our heart forward. Beau's hand came to rest on her shoulder, warm and steady. Told you my parents weren't quite what the town thinks. They are. They're exactly what families should be, Ella managed, looking up at Eleanor and Frank's kind faces. People who understand that love doesn't follow rules. It makes its own. Well said, dear. Eleanor's eyes were suspiciously bright. Now, who's hungry? I made Rebecca's apple pie recipe, though I suspect you've already had Maria's version. That woman, she chuckled, has been feeding this family's soul for 3 generations. As they moved toward the kitchen, Ella clutched the new legacy book to her chest. Behind her, the family Bible sat open, its blank spaces no longer looking like accusations, but like possibilities. Clean pages waiting for new stories of love and belonging to be written. The plastic hospital bracelet read, Martinez Diego, age 8, its stark white surface reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room waiting area. Ella twisted it in her hands, the events of the afternoon playing on repeat in her mind. Diego's sudden collapse during their science lesson, his face pale and still against the schoolhouse floor, the terrible moment when she couldn't find a pulse. You did everything right, Beau's voice came from beside her, steady and sure. The doctor said your CPR saved his life. But Ella couldn't stop seeing it. The way Diego had stumbled during his presentation about ranch wildlife, how his small body had crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. She'd moved on instinct, years of mandatory teacher first aid training kicking in while Lucy ran for help and the other children huddled together in frightened silence. His heart, she whispered. 8 years old and his heart just a congenital defect they didn't know about. Beau's arm tightened around her shoulders. But they know now. They can treat it. Because you noticed something was wrong even before he collapsed. Because you didn't wait to call 911 when he said he felt dizzy. Down the hall, Rosa Martinez paced outside her son's room, her ranch hand husband Tony holding her as she prayed. In rapid Spanish, Maria sat nearby, a steady presence offering coffee and comfort. The ranch community had mobilized instantly, other hands covering Tony's duties, parents picking up the rest of the students, someone thinking to grab Diego's favorite Cowboys cap from his desk. Miss Ella? Lucy's small voice drew their attention. She stood in the waiting room doorway, clutching a handmade card. The other kids and me, we made this for Diego. Her bottom lip trembled. Is he gonna be okay? Ella opened her arms, and Lucy came running, burrowing into her embrace. The doctors are taking very good care of him, sweetheart. They're going to help his heart get stronger, like how you helped his heart keep beating. Lucy looked up, her eyes wide. Papa said you were a hero, said you knew exactly what to do, just like when Miss Rebecca helped Tommy Henderson after he fell off his horse that time. Beau's breath caught audibly. Ella felt his hand tremble where it rested against her back. I remember that day, he said softly. Rebecca kept him calm and still until the ambulance came. Turned out he had a spinal fracture. Doctor said if she'd let him move. He swallowed hard. Some things don't change. This school, these children, they've always drawn the kind of teachers who see it as more than just a job. Mr. Beau. Lucy's voice was small. Is it okay that sometimes Miss Ella reminds me of Miss Rebecca? Not the same, but like how Mama says stars are all different, but they all help light up the dark. Ella felt tears spring to her eyes, but Beau's voice was steady when he answered. That's exactly right, Lucy. And yes, it's absolutely okay. A commotion down the hall interrupted them. Diego's doctor emerged from his room, smiling. He's awake and asking for his teacher. Rosa, rushed to Ella, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "Me angel, the doctor said, he said if you hadn't—" She broke off, crying. "Go on," Bo whispered, gently disentangling Lucy. "Your student needs you." Diego looked small in the hospital bed, wrapped in white sheets and trailing monitoring wires, but his smile was as bright as ever. "Miss Ella, did you see? I got a cool bracelet just like yours." Ella laughed through her tears, holding up her visitor's bracelet to match his. "Look at that! We're bracelet buddies. Mama says you helped my heart when it got tired." He looked at her seriously, like how we helped that baby bird that fell from its nest last week. "Remember? You said sometimes things need extra help to be strong." "That's right." She took his small hand, marveling at the steady pulse beneath her fingers. "And you're going to get all the help you need to get strong again. Can we still do science class outside when I come back? I didn't get to finish my presentation about the Hawk family living in the old oak tree." "You bet we can. That Hawk family isn't going anywhere." She squeezed his hand. "They're waiting for their favorite researcher to come back." Later, in the quiet of the hospital corridor, Bo found her staring out the window at the gathering dusk. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, letting her lean back against his strength. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I know, but you didn't let the fear stop you. You did what needed doing." His lips brushed her temple. "Made me fall in love with you all over again, watching you save that boy's life. Watching you with Lucy after. Seeing you be exactly what everyone needed." She turned in his arms, pressing her face into his chest. I think I finally understand what Rebecca meant in her legacy book, about every child carrying a piece of our heart forward." She looked up at him. "They really do, don't they? Whether they're ours by blood or choice or just because they come into our classroom one day and become part of our story." "Yeah," he said softly, holding her close as the hospital bustled. Around them and somewhere down the hall, a child's laugh rang out like hope. "Yeah, they really do." The adoption agency pamphlets spread across Ella's kitchen table like a roadmap to possibility. Building families through love. The journey to adoption, fostering hope. Their glossy surfaces caught the late afternoon light streaming through her cottage windows. Bo sat beside her, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied a form titled Home Study Preparation. "They want to know everything," he mused, flipping through pages. "Financial records, character references, why we want to adopt." He looked up at her. "You ready for this, for all of it?" Ella touched a photo in one of the brochures, a mixed group of children playing under a tree, their faces bright with laughter. It could have been her own students. Could have been the scene under the old oak tree any day of the week. "I've been thinking about something Diego said in the hospital," she said slowly, "about helping things be strong. About how sometimes the strongest families are the ones we build on purpose, with love and intention. Like the ranch," Bo nodded. "Nobody here is connected just by blood, but it's family all the same." She reached for his hand. "When I was with James, having children was about continuing a bloodline, about living up to expectations, but with you," she squeezed his fingers. "With you, it's about love, about choice, about building something meaningful together." He brought their joined hands to his lips. "You know it won't be easy. The home study, the waiting, the scrutiny, especially in a small town like Cedar Valley. Let them scrutinize." Her voice was firm. "Let them see exactly what family can look like when it's built on love instead of obligation." She pulled out another pamphlet. "Look at this program. Sibling groups who need to stay together. Children who might get separated otherwise." Bo's eyes softened as he read. "Like Lucy and her cousins. 3 generations of Rodriguez children growing up together on the ranch because their grandparents believed family belongs together." "Exactly." Ella stood, moving to her window. The schoolhouse was visible from here, and beyond it the old oak tree, where so many of their important moments had happened. "I used to think my inability to have children was an ending, but what if it was just a different beginning? A way to create family that's bigger than biology?" She felt Beau's arms slide around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. You know what Rebecca wrote in that legacy book? Sometimes the families we choose are the ones we were meant to have all along. She was wise, your Rebecca. She was. His voice held no sadness now, only gentle remembrance, and she'd love this. Love seeing the school full of children again. Love knowing that her death didn't end the story. It just made room for new chapters to be written. Ella turned in his arms. Are you sure you're ready? To be a father, to... He silenced her with a kiss, soft and sure. I'm ready to build a family with you. Ready to open our hearts and home to children who need both. Ready to show Cedar Valley that love doesn't follow their narrow rules. A knock at the door interrupted them. Maria stood there, holding her infamous cast-iron skillet. I brought dinner, but... She looked at the pamphlets scattered across the table, her eyes filling with tears. Ay, mis amores, finally... Maria, Ella started. But the older woman was already putting down her skillet and gathering them both in a fierce embrace. I knew, she said firmly. I knew from the first day when you rang that school bell. Knew you would bring life back to this place, bring family back to this ranch. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. Now sit, eat. You'll need strength for all this paperwork, and nobody makes important decisions on an empty stomach. As they settled around Ella's small table, pushing aside pamphlets to make room for Maria's enchiladas, Ella felt a profound sense of rightness. This was family, Maria's loving interference, Beau's steady presence, the promise of children who would come to them not through birth, but through choice and love. First thing tomorrow, Beau said, passing her a plate. We'll call the agency, start the home study process. And I'll start planning how to turn that empty bedroom in the main house into a children's paradise, Maria added. Every child needs their own space to bloom. Ella looked between them. Her chosen family, her new beginning. Outside, the setting. Sun painted the ranch in shades of gold, and somewhere in the distance, a child's laughter carried on the evening breeze. It sounded like promise, like hope, like love choosing its own path home. The community petition lay unfolded on the town hall podium, pages of signatures supporting the Callahan Ranch School's official recognition as an accredited educational facility. Diego Martinez's mother had started it during his hospital stay, her fierce gratitude spurring her to action. Our children deserve a school where they're seen as family, she'd written, where teachers know CPR and ranch safety alongside reading and arithmetic. Now, facing the Cedar Valley School Board and what felt like half the town, Ella stood beside Beau, her hand clasped tightly in his. The wooden panels behind them still held the faded photographs of past board members, generations of Cedar Valley's finest families looking down with painted judgment. The question before us, Board President William Henderson drawled, is whether a private ranch school, operating outside traditional oversight, can provide adequate education for our community's children. Adequate. Tony Martinez stood, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who'd worked the land for 20 years. My son is alive because of that school's teacher. My daughter writes poetry about ecosystems. They're learning ranch management alongside mathematics. I'd say that's better than adequate. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ella saw Sarah sitting with Maria near the front, both women radiating supportive energy. But she also saw Margaret Matthews whispering to her circle of friends. Saw James shift uncomfortably in his seat. No one disputes Miss Sullivan's quick thinking during young Diego's emergency. Margaret spoke up, her voice honey-sweet with venom. But we must consider the unusual domestic situation developing at the ranch. The example being set, you mean the example of love healing broken hearts? Maria's voice cut through the whispers, of family being about more than blood. See, we should definitely consider that example. What Mrs. Matthews means, James stood not quite meeting Ella's eyes, is that there are concerns about stability, about the future, about our plans to adopt. Beau's quiet words silenced the room, about how we're choosing to build our family through love instead of biology. He stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. Good. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how this school has always been about more than just reading and writing. It's about community, about belonging. Ella squeezed his hand and stepped up beside him. When Rebecca Callahan ran this school, she taught her students that family comes in many forms, that love doesn't follow rules. It makes its own path. She pulled out a worn piece of paper. This is from her teaching journal. She wrote, "Today my students learned that the strongest ranch fences aren't the ones that keep things out, but the ones that give things room to grow." A soft sound came from the audience. Eldona Callahan was crying silently, Frank's arm around her shoulders. "The ranch school has 12 students now," Ella continued. 12 children learning not just academics, but empathy, responsibility, the kind of practical knowledge that comes from having your classroom extend beyond 4 walls. She smiled at Lucy, who sat proudly in her father's lap. They're learning that family is about showing up for each other, about celebrating differences instead of fearing them. "The adoption agency has already approved our home study," Bo added, his voice gentle but firm. "They specifically cited our school environment as a positive factor, a place where children can heal, grow, and belong." "But tradition," Margaret began. "Tradition." Diego's voice piped up from his seat, still pale but determined. "Miss Ella says tradition is just love that lasted, like how Mr. Bo's grandmother made quilts for stargazing, and now we use them for our astronomy lessons, or how Miss Rebecca started picnic lessons under the oak tree, and we still do that." "From the mouths of babes," Sarah murmured, loud enough to carry. William Henderson cleared his throat. "We have received over 200 signatures supporting the ranch schools. Accreditation. We've reviewed the curriculum, which exceeds state standards while incorporating valuable practical education." He adjusted his glasses. "And we've noted that since Miss Sullivan took over, test scores have actually improved. Because children learn better where they feel safe," Rosa Martinez said firmly. "Where they're treated like family." "I move to approve the petition," a board member called out. "Seconded," another added quickly. The vote was quick, decisive. 7 hands raised in favor, none against. Even James, after a long moment, raised his hand, though he wouldn't meet his mother's. Outraged stare. Afterward, as people filed out of the town hall, Lucy ran up to hug Ella's legs. "Does this mean our school is official now? And," she looked up hopefully, "does it mean you and Mr. Bo can start getting us some new brothers and sisters soon?" Ella knelt down to the little girl's level, aware of Bo's warm presence. Beside her, of Maria and Sarah's proud smiles, of the whole community watching this moment of truth. "Yes, sweetheart," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "It means exactly that, because family isn't about who you're born to, it's about who you choose to love. And this ranch, this school, we choose love every single day." The setting, sun through the town hall windows, caught the tears in Bo's eyes as he helped her up, wrapped an arm around her waist, and led their growing family out into the golden evening light. The marriage license sat on Maria's kitchen counter. "It's official. Text stark against cream paper. Bo Alexander Callahan and Ella Mae Sullivan." But it was the other papers beside it that kept drawing Ella's eyes as she sat in her wedding dress. Adoption approval documents, their future, written in government letterhead and possibility. "Stop fiddling with your flowers, mijita," Maria scolded gently, adjusting Ella's crown of Texas wildflowers. "They're perfect, just like everything else." The kitchen buzzed with quiet activity. Sarah arranging reception plates, Eleanor pressing last-minute details on Ella's simple white dress, Lucy practicing her flower girl walk with serious concentration. Through the window, Ella could see the ranch transformed. The old oak tree stretched its ancient branches over rows of white chairs, its leaves dancing in the autumn breeze. Student artwork lined the path to the makeshift altar, pictures of ranch life, of family, of love in all its forms. "Miss Ella?" Lucy paused in her practicing. "Is it true that after you and Mr. Bo say, 'I do,' Tommy and Annie will really..." Come live with us." Ella's heart swelled. The siblings, 8 and 6 years old, had stolen their hearts during their first meeting at the children's home. Tommy's serious eyes and Annie's infectious giggle had felt right, felt like pieces, clicking into place. "Yes, sweetheart, they'll be here next week, just in time to start school." "Good." Lucy nodded decisively. "I already told them all about our picnic lessons and the secret hideout behind the schoolhouse. Annie can share my reading spot under the oak tree." A knock at the kitchen door made them all turn. Frank Callahan stood there looking uncomfortable, in his suit but his eyes warm. "Ladies, mind if I have a moment with my future daughter-in-law?" The others filtered out, Maria shooing Lucy along with promises of preview cookies. Frank settled into a kitchen chair, pulling out an old envelope. "Rebecca wrote this," he said quietly. "Asked me to give it to whoever Bo found to love again." He held up a hand as Ella started to protest. Not because she wanted to haunt his future, because she knew him, knew he'd need permission to be completely happy today. With trembling fingers, Ella opened the envelope. "To the woman who taught him to smile again, thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to love a man who knows loss. Thank you for understanding that his heart has room for both grief and joy. Thank you for making the school bell ring again. I don't know you, but I know this ranch. Know how it heals broken things, how it makes family from love instead of obligation. Take care of our children, the ones in the schoolhouse, the ones who'll come to you through choice instead of chance, all of them. Love them fiercely, and on your wedding day, know that you're not replacing anyone. You're writing your own chapter in a story that's big enough for all of us. With love and blessing, Rebecca." Ella looked up through tears to find Bo in the doorway, his own eyes wet. "Your mama said I'd find you here," he said roughly. "I know. It's bad luck," but she was in his arms before he could finish, the letter pressed between them. "She knew," Ella whispered against his chest. "Somehow she knew we'd need this today." "Yeah." He pulled back enough to see her face. "You okay? With all of it? The wedding, the kids coming so soon after?" "I'm perfect." She smiled up at him. "This is exactly right. All of it." A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see their guests arriving. Ranch hands in pressed shirts, students with their families, even some town folks. James stood awkwardly, at the edge of the gathering, having come without his mother. Sarah was directing traffic with cheerful authority, while Maria distributed hugs and appetizers with equal enthusiasm. "Last chance to run away," Bo teased softly. "Never." She touched his face. "We've got 2 children coming home to us next week. We've got a school full of kids who need us. We've got each other. I'm exactly where I want to be." The wedding itself passed in a blur of joy and tears. Lucy scattered flower petals with scientific precision. Diego, fully recovered, carried the rings with proud responsibility. Eleanor read Rebecca's favorite poem about love being stronger than fear. Maria and Sarah stood as witnesses, their faces shining with happy tears, and when the pastor finally pronounced them husband and wife, the school bell rang out across the ranch, Lucy's special contribution to the moment. Its clear tone carried across the valley, speaking of endings and beginnings, of love that makes its own rules, of family built choice by choice, heart by heart. Later, during their first dance, Bo held her close under the oak tree's spreading branches. "Happy?" he whispered. Ella looked around at their gathered family, blood and chosen, young and old, all connected by love that transcended traditional boundaries. She thought of Tommy and Annie, coming home to them in just a few days. Thought of Rebecca's blessing, of Lucy's welcomed conspiracies, of all the children who would find belonging in their classroom. "Beyond happy," she answered. "I'm home." The class photo captured everything that made the Callahan Ranch School special. 20 children now, not 12, arranged on the schoolhouse steps, with the old oak tree spreading protective branches above them. Tommy and Annie sat front and center, their once hesitant smiles now bright and sure. Lucy stood beside them, her arm around Annie in the easy affection of best friends. Diego perched on the top step, his heart strong and his grin wide. And at the center of it all, Ella and Bo stood together, with 3-year-old Michael, their newest foster child, perched on Bo's hip. The little boy had arrived 3 months. Ego, too young for school, but old enough to wrap the entire ranch around his tiny finger. Perfect timing, Sarah called, lowering her camera. Just before the rain. The late autumn sky threatened storms, but nobody moved to go inside. These children had learned that some moments were worth getting a little wet for. Miss Ella? Tommy tugged at her sleeve. Can we show Michael the surprise now, before it rains? Ella exchanged a glance with Bo, who nodded. Go ahead, son. Tommy beamed at the word, he still did every time, and took his little foster brother's hand. The other children fell into formation behind them, a plan clearly long in the making. They led the way to the old oak tree, where a new addition had appeared, a wooden platform wrapped around the trunk, creating a reading nook complete with cushions, and a small roof. We all helped build it, Annie burst out, unable to contain her excitement. The older kids did the heavy stuff with Mr. Bo and Mr. Tony, and us younger ones painted and decorated. Look, Michael pointed with 3-year-old delight. Stars. The platform's roof was indeed painted with constellations, a tribute to Bo's grandmother's stargazing quilt. The railings held carved names of every child who'd ever attended the ranch school, starting with those first students from 1923. We found all the names in Miss Rebecca's legacy book, Lucy explained, and we left room for more. Lots more, Ella felt Bo's arm tighten around her waist as they took in their children's creation. The past year had brought so many changes. Tommy and Annie's adoption finalized, Michael's arrival, the school's expansion. Each step had felt like fulfilling a promise made under these very branches. There's one more surprise, Diego announced. He pulled out a familiar leather-bound volume, the companion book to the family Bible, the one Eleanor had given them on their wedding day. We all wrote in it about what family means to us. The children had filled pages with their thoughts, their drawings, their hearts poured out in pencil and crayon and careful cursive. Annie's neat handwriting caught Ella's eye. Family is like our oak tree. It grows branches to hold everybody who needs holding, and it has roots that go deep but also spread wide to hold hands with other trees. And sometimes branches break in, storms, but new ones grow. And sometimes birds come to nest for just a season, like Michael maybe, but they're still part of the tree's story. Out of the mouths of babes, Maria's voice came from behind them. She stood with Sarah and the Callahan. Grandparents, all of them having quietly gathered for this moment. The first fat drops of rain began to fall, but nobody moved. Michael squirmed down from Bo's arms to explore his new reading nook, his delighted giggles mixing with the pattering drops. You know what this reminds me of? Eleanor said softly. That first day you rang the school bell, Ella. How it echoed across the valley like hope. Ring it now, Lucy pleaded, like we do every morning. Ella reached for the bell that hung by the schoolhouse door, the same bell that had called her home a year ago. Its clear tone rang out across the ranch, and carrying through the gentle rain. That sound, Bo murmured against her hair, will never get old. They stood together, watching their children splash in the rain, watching Michael explore his new perch under Tommy's protective eye, watching Annie and Lucy twirl with their faces turned to the sky. The oak tree sheltered them all. Its branches, wider than ever, its roots deep and sure. In town, they said the Callahan Ranch had changed, that it wasn't traditional anymore, wasn't proper. But looking at their gathered family, blood and chosen young and old, temporary and permanent, Ella knew they'd simply expanded the definition of tradition, made it big enough to hold all the love they had to give. Ready for more? Bo asked quietly, and she knew he wasn't just talking about the rain. Their social worker had called yesterday about twin 5-year-olds needing an emergency placement. The ranch house had room, the school had space, their hearts had endless capacity. Always, she answered, thinking of Rebecca's words from so long ago. Legacy isn't just about filling spaces in a book. It's about filling spaces in hearts. The rain fell soft and steady, blessing the oak tree, the children, the family they'd built choice by choice, and love by love. The school bell's echo lingered in the air like a promise kept, like a story continuing, like love writing its own rules about what makes a family whole.